I am the Director of Workforce Development for the South Carolina Manufacturers Alliance. We're a trade association in South Carolina that works with manufacturers of all sizes. Everybody who employs folks from 5 employees all the way up to 11,000 employees. That's our largest member. And so anyway, I'm excited to be able to moderate today's panel. I think we're going to have a great discussion. We have a wonderful group of individuals in South Carolina, and Teresa, who is the CEO of WIN, joining us. And we've done a little bit of work ahead of time to kind of get everybody on the same page. But the purpose of this particular conversation is to talk about what makes South Carolina so special in terms of what we're doing, all the way from K through 12 to the individuals who are out in the workforce, get the perspective of an employer. And so I think we're going to have a really great discussion about what makes South Carolina stand out. So I've obviously introduced myself, and so what I'd like to do is have each one of the participants also introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about your role, your organization, and also kind of give us, an example of, kind of what you're doing in terms of, building the talent pipeline throughout South Carolina. So Val, let's start with you, and we'll go around.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to join this illustrious team. I'm Val Richardson, and I serve as the Director of Talent Acquisition and Workforce Development for Prisma Health. And in that role, I optimize our access to internal and external talent so that we have the folks that we need to care for patients within our community between here in the Midlands and in the Greenville market. And one of the ways that we work within the state is through my service with the State Workforce Board. And on that State Workforce Board, I chair the Collaboration and Partnership Committee. And along with others on our board, we have developed a statewide plan, which involves a lot of our partners, to include the Commission of the Blind, the State Department of Education, Adult Ed, and we've devised ways that we can all align and share resources. And on the Collaboration and Partnership Committee, we have developed some sector partnerships. And in those sector partnerships, our state is concentrating on advanced manufacturing and in healthcare. And so what we've realized is that we could do a whole lot more to raise the access to talent if we all work together, whether it's an industry association, whether it's 2-year, 4-year colleges, outreach to our K-12 and our career and technology education partners, and any of our governmental departments that provide us with funding. We have found that to be very fruitful going forward. And I'm excited about all the work that is happening across the state to ensure that we have access to that talent that we're going to need.
Well, thank you, Gray.
Thanks, James. My name is Gray Parks. I'm the Assistant Executive Director for the Department of Employment and Workforce. And my role is to help people find jobs and to help employers find people. Val mentioned that she's a member of the State Workforce Development Board. Our agency provides staff to the board. We work in close partnership with business and industry members, not just from that board, but from across the state. And really what our agency's role is to really have an understanding of what the needs of business and industry are, not only right now from a workforce perspective, but also what are their needs going to be in the future? Because really the business and industry should drive workforce development, and our role as government should be to work with them to provide them with the skilled workers that they need. And in order for us to do that, we have to have an understanding of the types of skills that they're looking for. So I'm excited to join this panel, James. I'm excited to kind of talk about the partnerships that South Carolina has formed.
Yeah, and Molly?
Well, thanks, and I'm very excited to be on this panel today. My name is Molly Spearman. I serve as the State Superintendent of Education for South Carolina. I am an elected constitutional officer here in South Carolina in my 2nd term. And my job really is to make sure that every high school student in South Carolina, when they graduate, that they're ready for college, career, and citizenship. And in doing that, we have learned that we need to have better partnerships with all the folks you see here and others across the state to be sure that we are offering opportunities for our young people to know what's available, know the job market in South Carolina. And as educators, we need to know it well, what kind of skills are needed, and then that we give them the basic foundation education that they need to, while they're in high school, be able to start working on those skills so that they can be prepared and ready to go to work, ready to go to technical college, and on to whatever pathway, whether it's 4-year, 2-year, or straight into the workforce. It has been remarkable to see the growth in our collaboration. I've been in office 6 years to witness this. We have a very talented team here at the Department of Education, but working with all of our folks that we quite honestly didn't know real well 6 years ago. And we know them much better, and we work with the committees that Val mentioned, and to be sure that we understand what industry needs and that industry understands what we can offer and what our needs are. So we spend a lot of time together, and it's been very worthwhile.
Great. And Teresa?
Thank you, James. I am Teresa Chasteen. I'm President and CEO of Win Learning, and my prior background is education, but for the last 25 years, I've been helping states with policy initiatives around career readiness and helping provide the tools. We've done it for a great number of states in K-12 and adult education and workforce programs. When I first started in this business, everything was kind of siloed apart. And it's great to see a state come together, and South Carolina is the best example of that, where all the agencies are working together to provide a common language that speaks both to employers and to educators, and a way to communicate with each other and help students succeed. And so we're excited about it, honored to be part of it. We provide the assessments and the skills training and the professional services to help promote the credentials and any support that we can provide. So we're honored to be a part of it.
Well, thank you, guys. One thing I did forget to mention up front is please feel free at any point to drop a question in the room chat, and we will get to those at the appropriate time. But let's get kind of into the nuts and bolts of what we're here to talk about. So I want to start with you, Teresa, and kind of talk about a little bit, as a career readiness solutions partners for many states, and you guys are all throughout South Carolina. Kind of curious what type of trends, especially from an education workforce standpoint, are you seeing emerging, especially in this weird time that we're all experiencing?
Well, when we first started WIN 25 years ago, the real issue we were trying to address were foundational skills like reading and math for the workplace, locating information, things that were needed for people to succeed. And then we almost went immediately into pre-employment, where it was literacy issues that they couldn't even get on the employment scale. What we're seeing over the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, is a real shift. Those skills are still needed and still provided, but there's a real shift toward soft skills and the essential soft skills that employers need their employees to have. And so that's probably been the biggest shift that we've had. And we've continued to build programs that would help states address those issues, whether it's students or job seekers, so that they can succeed in employment.
So, just like any other state within the nation, COVID came out of nowhere. And, as working with employers all throughout the state, and Val, this, there's no business plan that had pandemic written into it and what to deal with a situation like that. But what's been amazing in terms of South Carolina is how education and workforce has pivoted. Obviously there's a number of challenges, but, it was one of those things where, again, a Team South Carolina approach to address this challenge. So, Molly, I kind of want to start with you in regards to what's been going on. South Carolina, again, like a lot of other states, there's a little bit of a digital divide. And so when you had to overnight all of a sudden start working with school districts and help them in any manner they could to prepare to shift to this virtual world, I was kind of curious, how did you guys address those challenges? And also thinking about what Teresa just mentioned about the importance of skills and those particular components such as soft skills, for instance, how has the State Department continued to address that challenge and ensure that the students are getting the type of training, testing to earn credentials in this weird time?
Well, it took the ability to be very flexible and willing to be flexible and make changes. The legislature fortunately gave us the authority within the agency and as state superintendent to make immediate decisions about waivers and flexibility that needed to be given to help us survive the pandemic. So through our career centers that are scattered across the state, many of them with using safety protocols, even though students weren't coming every day, that we saw very quickly that we were going to have to open those facilities and allow those students to get into the facility to be able to use their hands-on skills. So we're really proud of the way our facilities opened to allow that to happen. The other thing that we had to do, not only just in career education, but in all of our elementary, middle programs, we really had to identify what the priority academic standards were that students needed to work on. If you can only have them for a short amount of time, let's really hone in on what's the foundational things that they need to learn. So that was really true in our career clusters as well. So we identified, our staff worked to get that information out and identify those priority standards for every career cluster, every program of study, and to be able to move students as quickly as possible. Our Office of Career Education worked on a work-based learning kit to assist with what students needed. We got that information out. In our middle schools, we were using the Learning Blade STEM curriculum to make sure that that resource was out there. It was free. And in our initial closings back in March and April, May, students had access to those high quality STEM programs. And then just to really get out additional resources and make them as accessible as possible, free, through our remote learning website. So in everything that we had to do, I think it was flexibility and speeding up and making use of whatever virtual experiences we could give students. That required a lot of professional development training, and we did, working along with SREB and using Nancy Fisher, Doug Frey's work. We did a lot of professional development for teachers to really make the best use of the virtual time that they had with students. So it took a lot of planning, a lot of focus, but just being willing to make the changes on a dime helped us be successful.
Okay. But, Greg, looking at what your agency does, you guys got hit, with pretty big challenges. And so, everything from the services related to unemployment claims to helping people find jobs, how did you guys pivot? And, really, what are you guys doing now that is a lot different than what you were doing in February?
Right. Well, James, as you know, we went from record low unemployment to the exact opposite of that in a very short amount of time. So as we were trying to get our hands around the number of people that were being displaced, we were also understanding that there were still businesses out there that were in need of people. So what we really had to focus on was, we were used to people being able to walk into our SC work centers to look for jobs and get face-to-face assistance with their resume and attend workshops. And we had to pivot to a virtual environment as well, much like education did, overnight, basically. And we had to start offering, our workshops virtually. We had to start, things as simple as job fairs that we used to do face-to-face, and we're used to doing those in person. We started working with business and industry that were hiring. We started doing drive-through job fairs where we would use parking lots at convention centers, and the employers would set up tents, and we would drive cars through like a Chick-fil-A on steroids almost is what they look like. You've got hundreds of cars and dozens of businesses, because, businesses still had needs and they still needed people. And our goal was to every person who was unemployed because of the pandemic, we needed to not only make sure that we could help them with their unemployment, but we needed to present them with what other options were out there for employment, whether that was in their industry or have them look and see what skills they may have that could be transferable to another industry. So it caused us to pivot really quick overnight as well and kind of get really comfortable with the virtual environment in a hurry.
And Val, you guys already had things in place to address virtual issues or training, interviews, that kind of stuff. But as a large employer, how have you guys pivoted to in terms of addressing your workforce needs?
Well, as you can imagine, while Gray was having drive-through job fairs, we were doing drive-through COVID testings. And so a lot of the ways that we serve patients had to change overnight. We shifted units to be only COVID units so that we could capitalize on the experiences of those folks that had been trained to do those things. But out of this COVID pandemic came a couple of new job titles. One in specific is the visitor service reps, those people that are screeners, folks that are coming in so that we can take temperatures and make sure that they should be entering. And that was one new whole role that was started because of COVID. And as you can imagine, we went from in-person interviewing to virtual interviewing, whether it's individual with that leader or peer team interviewing. We have really had to stop with going to the job fairs, but also participating in virtual job fairs. And what we have found is that a lot of the colleges went to the same thing, and we became very efficient at participating in those virtual career fairs that focused on the jobs that we need, and we're still doing that. So that was something very, very new. And so as you can imagine, where we're having to conduct a lot of compliance training, safety training, and there's over 33,000 team members that are assigned to us, the just-in-time training really was amped up to be able to take care of that 24/7. So we really maximize using our learning hub so that we can deliver just-in-time training, whether it is compliance training or professional development or performance management, so that we could reach everyone very, very quickly. During the onset of COVID, because we are a teaching facility, a lot of our clinical rotations had to be removed immediately for us to rethink how clinical rotation was happening. And so as you can imagine, the use of our simulation labs now has changed dramatically, because that is another way that we can help students to have that opportunity to study what they're going to do, to see one and to do one, so that when they're in the clinical learning environment working with live patients, that they've had an opportunity to practice before they come in. And so we had to remove them and then redetermine how to bring them back safely in intervals so that we could maintain social distancing, but also allow the students that were on clinical rotation with us to complete their rotations either with college or if they were in an apprenticeship with us.
One of the areas that I think would be kind of interesting to address, again, going back to the digital divide here in South Carolina, is, Gray, you had an interesting story about how cell phones are basically like a computer now for most people.
Mhm.
What are you guys doing now to make sure that these individuals who you can't go and physically see through a career fair, traditional type of way, is lining up with mobile devices and still reaching people to showcase opportunities? So, Gray, you want to take that one?
Sure, thanks. So one thing we found out really quickly was that since our centers were closed, we were going to have to figure out a new way to reach people. Well, our agency does take all the unemployment claims across the state, so we automatically have, built in this information on how to contact folks. So we have email addresses and phone numbers for everyone who's been displaced from their job and has filed an unemployment claim. So not only can you search for work through your phone, through an app on your phone, through our SC Works system, but also what we started doing was we started looking at areas of the state and what particular jobs were hiring in certain areas. We could then go to our unemployment list and we could filter that list down based off individuals in that area that had previous experience in those types of industries that are hiring. What we would then do or are doing is craft a specific message to those individuals telling them that there's jobs available that they may have experience in and sending them links on how to specifically apply for those jobs. So we're doing that through email and text. We started that right after the pandemic. The success we've seen from that has been, I think it has exceeded what our expectations were, but it makes sense because people's phones are now their lifeline, and sending direct emails and text has helped us reach an audience that we would have had a hard time reaching if we didn't have that built-in email address and that built-in phone number for folks. Plus, we know what their previous experience is as well, James. So we can look at the jobs that are available that in the industry that they were in, or maybe look for something similar where we know we can transfer their skills into that new business or industry.
Yeah. And so, Molly, it's kind of interesting what Gray had talked about in regards to, aligning people with, opportunities. And so, I kind of want to go back to what you guys have going on within the Department of Education about making sure that what's going on in the classroom aligns with the job market. You've got plenty of examples to showcase, there's talent out there. And so, yes, we have a challenge right now, but we also have an opportunity to make sure these people get good careers. So what's going on with the agency?
Yeah, that's right. Well, again, it's about us knowing each other, staying in touch, and letting not just the students know what's available, but educating the educators and also their parents, the students' parents and grandparents. I think this started before the pandemic, but during the summer months, don't be surprised if you go on a manufacturing floor and you see teachers gathered around a machine working. Because a number of our industries have started inviting educators in on the floor to be a part of it, to work there for a few weeks to really get the taste. We make sure now that our middle and high school students, but we start early, elementary even, talking about career readiness, and through our WIN readiness assessment, it really helps them connect their math and literacy skills to what's required for future careers, and seeing that and giving them purpose. We know, and this is true across the country, our graduation rate here in South Carolina is about 85%. It hovers around that number. But we know that if we can get students engaged and really excited about what they're learning, whether it's reading, math, whatever courses they're taking, and get them involved in a CTE course, the graduation rate goes up to 98%. Isn't that remarkable? And that's really all about seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. This is why I'm learning. And if I do this, then I'll be able to do that. So having that access, explaining that to students, letting them see that connection between what they're learning and what the end result might be for them. So we've had a great increase in our students participating in CTE programs. Our dual credit attainment is part of that. In order to have a really strong CTE program, we now look to make sure that the student not only has a work-based experience, that they get their program of study completed, that they get an industry credential, but they also have dual credit attainment. And that's gone up for us over 74% in the last year or two of how many dual credit attainment courses students have. And industry credentials has gone up over 21%. And I think it's really making sure that those quality programs are there, the opportunities available, but also that students understand, if I study this, I will be able to do that, and this is a career path for me.
So, it's kind of interesting where I think you can see a pivot also in terms of the opportunities that people have in front of them now. There could be an individual who may have been in a particular industry, and now they could go into something like healthcare, manufacturing. And so I'm kind of curious, Gray and Val, are you guys seeing job seekers right now interested in pursuing different types of careers that are coming to you guys and looking for employment opportunities?
Well, I'll be happy to address it. What I find that's exciting is, sometimes the role that folks have had has been hard hit by COVID, especially hospitality and leisure. And so we have this large pool of folks that have been working, and they now have an opportunity to see how they can be retrained. And so they probably have all the wonderful attributes of a great worker, whether it be teamwork or critical thinking or problem solving, and they have some longevity in a field. But the field that industry no longer has a viable option for them. So those would be great people for, things like quick jobs through a technical college where they can be retrained for high demand jobs like healthcare, EMT, CNA, and, moving forward to the LPN program or nursing program or respiratory, radiology, just the opportunity to rediscover. In my conversations with my partners with the technical colleges, they find that about more than 25% of the folks that are there for training as a second career. And, folks that are choosing a second career, they're really motivated to do something new. And so sometimes we don't give our technical colleges and our CTE enough credit for its ability to take a person where they are, whether they're a junior or a senior in high school and they're in a health science cluster and they're discovering that they can complete their CNA credential in high school, and then helping them to get linked to one of our technical college partners and keep moving forward with our four-year partners because they have worked so well together to make that smooth transition between high school, technical college, and four-year college. And the adult learner is no different if they're starting with that technical college opportunity. And sometimes that technical college environment gives people the chance to get their college legs back, to see that they can be successful in academia again. The classroom size is a little bit smaller. They see adult learners in that environment. Usually they're all over about 26 years old, and it's a second career. So it's a great way for them to begin again and try something new. And we actually welcome that as employers because these are folks that have already proven that they are great workers.
She said, I was going to say exactly that, James. But she used it, Valerie used a great example talking about leisure and hospitality. And I think what we've seen in South Carolina is that industry has been probably the most affected due to COVID. Those employees were displaced first, and they have been the slowest to come back. We've had some manufacturing folks that did have some layoffs, but that industry's come back very, very strong during COVID. But leisure and hospitality has not. And I think one of the things that our agency is doing is trying to reach out and this goes back to partnerships. It's trying to let folks know, okay, you may have been in the hospitality industry, but you have certain foundational skills that can be transferred over to another industry, and letting them know what options are out there, not just from jobs that are available right now, but if they are interested in training, where they can get that training. Is it long-term? Is it short-term? What are they interested in? We partnered up with our state technical college system, and we're sending very detailed messaging out to folks that are drawing unemployment insurance about what sort of short-term training options are available through their local technical colleges for those folks that are looking to take, those current foundational skills they have now and move them into maybe some more hard skills in a new industry. And we're seeing some success at that, but that's our goal, is to really help communicate that out there for those folks that are interested in looking to make a career change.
And Teresa, I'd like to ask you, based off of what these two individuals have shared, WIN is being used, I think, in all the schools within South Carolina.
Yes.
How does WIN play a role in terms of skill assessment, capability, and in kind of a particular area like what we're facing that can help individuals align and showcase who they are and capable of?
Sure. So what we do and what our program does is it does an initial skills review or a placement test, depending on how the state's implementing it, where the user can see where they are and what skills they need to go to the program they want to go into, whether it's CTE, it might be nursing, it might be any of these other fields that we're talking about, and see how their skills align. If they aren't successful on achieving the skills they want, then we also have skills training built in. And with the pandemic, it's become very popular to have these online resources that are relevant to what they want to do. I was thinking when Dr. Spearman was talking, when I was in education, one of the questions I got asked repeatedly is, Ms. Chasteen, when are we ever going to use this? Mm-hmm. And so it goes back to what she's saying and to what Gray and Val are talking about as well. These are skills that are foundational to any profession that they want to go into. Obviously, some require different levels. That's why we have different levels. But as they move through this, it opens up the options of what they can choose to do going forward. And then after they do the skills training and go through formative assessments along the way, and a lot of times it's facilitated by teachers in the classroom or facilitated online since the pandemic has been going on, then they'll take a post-assessment to see if they're ready for the credentialing assessment. And then every year, all of the juniors, which are rising seniors, take the career readiness assessment in a K-12 level. And in the workforce programs, they take it along the way at the appropriate time as well. So they've got a common credential. They do both the foundational skills credential and the soft skills credential, and it's signed by the governor and part of a portfolio that they can present to an employer. So an employer knows that they have the skills needed to succeed on the job.
And so that brings me to my next point. Molly, you talk all the time about the importance of having strong reading and math skills, core areas, the fundamentals. And so, we've got these great resources throughout the state. And, what I kind of want to hear your perspective of, what your agency is doing in terms of focusing on improving those core competencies, but how all these dots are being connected throughout South Carolina. And we're all working, whether it's a short-term goal or a long-term goal, to address those particular challenges. You've got a company that you worked with in a very rural area. Share that story about how you address that issue to help that particular company.
Yeah, thank you, James. Well, reading and math skills start very early, and it starts with access to high quality early childhood education for every student, and really strong teachers who know how to teach children to read. and to do their math. I will share with you that as the data is coming in to us now, and seems to be repeated across the country, the pandemic has, just as we expected, children being out of school in March for 9 weeks, and then there are a few places where school's not open yet. Most of our schools are back. About 99% of our children are getting at least some face-to-faces, but still, we did assess all of our children, and there has been a tremendous learning loss. And the surprise is that in reading, they've kind of held their own. There's been some loss, but the greater loss has been in mathematics. And so we're going to really have to do some extra work, and that's already started with interventions with students, one-on-one work with them, and I'll be going to our legislature to ask them for additional funding so that we can really have robust interventions all during the spring and in the summer if needed. But the real story, I think, is getting students again to understand what's available and giving them the opportunity. You know that part of our work here has been to ensure that every child in South Carolina gets the opportunity. We've got some fantastic career centers that people come from all around the world to visit, and but they're not available to every child in the state. And typically that is in the more rural areas, and the programming is just not as strong. So we've been working, and we were ready to go to try and build some regional high school career centers. The pandemic put that to a halt, but we're going to get back on it real soon. But one of our big success stories is down in the Ph.D. and in a district where we had to take over management. That doesn't happen often, but went in and we declared an emergency in the Timmonsville School District, and we called for the emergency. I went into the library, and the students were looking forlorn, and what do you want me to do to improve your school? And the hands go up, and this young man said, I want to be a welder, but we don't have a program, and they won't let me go over to the next district. And it took a phone call, one phone call. And I'm thrilled to tell you right now, that young man was in the 10th grade. He graduated in June from Timmonsville High School, and he's went to work as a welder because we got him into a welding program. He's already got his better job because somebody stole him away from the first company and gave him better pay. So,
love it.
Yeah, being involved changed his life and his grandparents' life forever. And then the other story, I think, to be able to be adaptable, it's not all about those really what we call the highest paying job, but we got to get everybody into the job market. And so the Scotsman Ice Plant is been there forever down in Allendale, one of our poorest areas. And we work very closely with the folks at Department of Workforce Development because Scotsman couldn't find enough people, and there were people standing on the street without jobs, but they didn't have the literacy. They didn't have the reading skills that they needed. So our adult ed program, which usually focuses on getting your GED or high school diploma, we said, look, they're not at that point. They just need a little strengthening their reading skills. And so Scotsman promised them a job, and we had about 20 people who went through this program. If you finish the program, improve your reading skills, we'll hire you. And that happened for those 20 families down in Allendale, and their lives are changed forever. And we can continue to work with them to get their GED, but you got to meet people where they are and help them with what they need to get that foot in the door. And so, again, being flexible and willing to give folks that opportunity, but it takes good relationships. I would have never known about that problem at Scotsman had Dan Elsie not come over and told us about it. And we were willing to say, well, they're not going to get a GED, it won't count on our numbers, but we're willing to go help them with what they need.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to this cooperative spirit. And, Val, I want to ask you a question. As a large employer and as someone who serves on a lot of boards, that kind of stuff, what really stands out to you about South Carolina, its education system, workforce development, all those things that kind of come together that works well for Prisma that maybe some of your partners or other companies you may work with in different states, it's just not quite the same. Is there anything in particular that really stands out that makes our state special?
Sure. I don't know how long you got, but I'll use one example. We have had strong partnerships with our high school health science programs for many years, but we also realized that we had people that already work with us that may have started with us many years ago. They may have had a GED or they may have graduated from high school a long time ago. They had a desire to move forward, but they just didn't have the skill sets to do so alone. And so one of our partnerships that we started a couple of years ago is with Apprenticeship Carolina and incumbent worker apprenticeships. And what we were finding is that Midlands Tech was holding info sessions and people didn't know about it and they couldn't come. Or we had people that were interested, but they were working 7A to 7P and they couldn't go. And then our community, maybe the workforce board had funding, but they couldn't get information to the people that needed the information to get them eligible. So we came together between Apprenticeship Carolina, Midlands Tech, and our folks at Prisma Health. Midlands Tech helped us to load the WIN software on our computers. Midlands Tech brought in the folks to help folks to determine if they were eligible. And sometimes that is, Richland, Lexington, Fairfield County. Sometimes it's income bracket. And then they brought in the department head for that program for the patient care technician for them to get their schedule. And so in about an hour and a half, we were able to get people the information about the quick jobs, how to qualify for the scholarships, to make sure that they were eligible, and then to give them a schedule and a voucher for up to about $4,500 to obtain the skills that they needed to increase their pay quite substantially to about $5 more an hour. And so using that partnership through the funding from the hire grant through the state workforce board, using our talent, our partner for education with Midlands Tech, working with our own employees, we were able to help them to overcome barriers for information, barriers around transportation. We worked with our Richland One Adult Ed for their classes to be held there because that is on the bus lines. There was no problem with that. They complete their clinical rotation at our Prisma Health sites because that's where they work anyway. And we were able to help them overcome the financial barrier of having to pay up front because the grant paid for their tuition, their books, and their supplies. And we were able to get 7 cohorts through because of that coming together of all of our partners to help make sure that we were giving people an opportunity to gain the skills that they needed. It has also worked well with our youth apprenticeships, with our chamber. For juniors and seniors that are interested in health careers, they're completing dual credit courses. They are seeking the nursing career pipeline. They are finishing high school with almost a year of work already done with Midlands Tech so that they can graduate from that nursing program a whole lot faster. So it was a great addition to our partnerships with Health Occupation Students of America, all of our high schools that have the Certified Nurse Assistant credential offerings there. And so it builds a great pipeline for them to keep moving if they so choose to do so. But that was a great collaborative opportunity for us to work together to help them to realize gaining that experience and the training that they need to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and so, it's kind of the perfect formula there. So Teresa, as a national organization, I'm really kind of curious in terms of looking ahead in 2021, is there a particular collaborative education workforce policy initiative or program or something to that effect that you would encourage our audience to consider?
Oh, wow. Just one. Do I get just one?
Yeah.
So one would be, and it's a little bit different. As I travel around the country, one thing that I've seen that when I initially started WIN, I would ask the question, what's the primary purpose of education? And I think we would all agree, like Dr. Spearman said, is to help learners succeed at work, at home, and in their community. And so we have to start with work, because without a sustainable wage, our job seekers or students can't succeed anyway. And so that's such a big area that we feel like we've made a lot of progress in policy-wise. But as I look around the country, one area that I think we have a big need in is, I talked a lot early on about individual graduation plans, and South Carolina was one of the first to make sure every student had an individual graduation plan. I'd love to see us all look at every student and job seeker having an individual career plan and a portfolio that they can walk out of the high school with, or any program that the state offers, so that an employer sees that they've had time to think about and plan for what they're doing to get the skills they need. And so if I had to pick one, that would probably be it, is how do we get an individual career plan in addition to the other resources that we're offering.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting a little tight on time, and I want to encourage people to submit questions still, but I've got a group question. I think every challenge presents opportunities. Whatever the challenge may be, you can always emerge from it okay. And so how do you think this disruption that we have experienced over the past several months will shift workforce development and education strategies in a manner that will continue to encourage people to pursue the great opportunities South Carolina has to offer? So Val, let me start with you.
Sure. As Teresa was talking, one of my things that I love to do was create an individual career plan with our own team members. And one of the things that I enjoyed most was that face-to-face with them to say, let's take a look at where you are, and let's take a look at the skills that you already have. And we're going to talk about a plan for you going forward. And I used to get so much enjoyment out of that face-to-face. Well, due to COVID, I had to shift those career progression conversations to an online modality. But what I'm finding is when we create the process for them to tell us what they need, that conversation can still happen online. And it is just as endearing and it is just as informative doing it that way. It really has helped folks to overcome, not that ability to get to me. They can get to me by a Microsoft Teams meeting. And we can sit down and talk about, are they a good fit for a technical college environment or a partnership through our 220 colleges or online modalities that we have, any of our community colleges. And then we talk about how to pay for it. So can you use your education assistance budget? Are you a candidate for some of the apprenticeships or a candidate for any of the quick job scholarships? And they're able to gain that information to keep moving forward. And so we can still serve them, but we've just had to change our modality. We've really had to beef up our social media when we are trying to connect with job seekers. So a lot more dependence on getting good use out of our website and our connections to any of the social media sites, and then chatting with those folks almost 24/7 and answering their questions and being a resource to them that way. So we've not stopped working. We've just changed the way that we deliver our learning and connect with our own team members as well as those that are seeking work. But, we've pivoted just like every other industry to be able to do that.
Gray, what opportunities do you see coming from this?
Well, I think, South Carolina's home to world-class companies across all business sectors. So I think from our agency standpoint, we've learned a lot about how we can effectively communicate. I mentioned some of those ways earlier with direct messaging and chat bots and those types of things. I think for us, it's just making sure that individuals that are out there that may be looking or may not be aggressively pursuing new opportunities, that we take the information to them. We let them know, what opportunities are out there, not only in the job market, but from a training perspective, what the potential wage increase could be for them. Because, some people are going to be real passive about that. But what we've seen is we've been aggressive in our marketing and our communication, and we really were forced into it because of the pandemic. And I think what we've learned is that this has got to be part of our long-term strategy. And this will just be, part of really our standard operating procedure as we move forward and work through this pandemic and get back to some sense of normalcy.
Molly, what do you see coming out of this?
Well, very similar. In education, we've learned a lot, and we're in a much better place virtually than we were in March. The digital divide came into focus, and it finally brought everybody to the table in South Carolina. And while we're not where we want to be, we are much further down the road where we need to be. And so that's great, and that's going to continue. I think the need for artificial intelligence, the work there, cybersecurity, all the work that's available in South Carolina now, we're making those new instructional models work better for our students, building the access to those courses. That will continue as we move along. And I think the other part, though, opposite from that, we've also learned you can't do it all virtually for students. There is a piece of this where they do need to come in and be with a great teacher, be with their friends, build those social skills that Teresa talks about so much. And so there has to be a balance. I think we've all recognized that virtual is wonderful. It's wonderful, but there still will always be a need for kids to come into a great school, sit down with their teacher and their friends, and build that have that social emotional support that they need to really be prepared to be great employees.
And, Teresa, what do you think is going to come out of this in terms of opportunity?
Well, the opportunities that I see, I guess, would be twofold. In the workforce arena, I would say there's so many newly unemployed that I would love to see a initial skills assessment embedded like we do in Florida in the portal so that they can get a jump start on what their skills are and move toward reemployment more quickly. On the K-12 side, I think there's an opportunity for us to look at our counselor to student ratio. And in a lot of states, the guidance counselors South Carolina has a jump on this because they mandated in 2018 300 to 1. But there are states where it's over 900 students to one counselor. And so for them to get any career guidance and planning, we need to work on that. If we can use things like the model Val and Gray and Dr. Spearman were talking about to augment that and do things virtually, I think there's a big opportunity to start looking at that need as well that will help all of us.
So we do have a question that I want to throw out there, very similar to the one that I asked Teresa about policy, workforce policy. Mm-hmm. Kind of a big one for you guys. That was not in your briefing document, but I'm going to throw it out to the South Carolina folks. What's kind of a policy workforce issue that you would like to see, our decision makers, our policy makers address in the coming year?
Well, I just really think that we should do everything that we can in our state to ensure that people have appropriate and feasible and reliable access to broadband, especially in our rural areas. Because sometimes people want to do more, they want to connect, they want to learn, they want to work. But if they're using their phone or if they don't have reliable access and we're having to depend heavily on virtual services, I'm sure that there are areas that we just can't get to. And without that, they can't get connected to career and technology education opportunities or to the information that that Gray is trying to get out to them. And so if we could make sure that across this state, we have reliable access to that, I think that would be very helpful.
Gray, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Val there. I mean, we see that, in in our agency as well, where folks may live in an area that they don't have broadband, and they may be 30 miles from a location where they can go and get services when offices are open. So we've tried to partner with local libraries, and they sort of serve as connection points for us, where individuals can go in there and still receive some of the services that we provide. But again, that's not the same as truly virtual type. And I think the broadband is definitely a challenge that we see in South Carolina.
You know, and Molly, education reform was the big issue last year. I know that's not going to go away, and I know you agree too with what Val and Gray had just talked about. But you know, is there something more unique in the K through 12 system right now?
Well, I would add it's very similar. Not only the access for broadband access for every family in South Carolina, but I would say access to more CTE programming for all high school students. It's really immoral when you see the disparity in the opportunities from an urban area in the state with a fantastic career center, and you go down to a rural area where our Economic Development Act from, what was that, almost 20 years ago, required that every school offer 3 clusters. Well, what we found, they may have 3, some may not, and they may not be very good. All students deserve at least 3 high quality programs to choose from, and that's not going to happen at every high school in the state unless we do work regionally. We may have to drive a little ways, but that's okay. So I think we had proposed that to build 3 to 5 more regional career centers in South Carolina for high school students, working with the community technical college and a 4-year college that's nearby, have sort of on the model that the Continuum was built on down in Florence and Lake City. But that we need at least 3 of those. And then I think every student in South Carolina would have access. So I'm going to continue to push that. I hope whomever this person is will join me and come on down to South Carolina. And Teresa, I'm willing to work on that career portfolio plan too. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and Teresa, is there kind of anything else from a policy standpoint that really stands out to you, that not just South Carolina, but also kind of throughout the nation, that really stands out as needs to be a priority across the board for policymakers?
Well, I just think it's exciting that 25 years ago, when I started this company, career education was not cool. It was seen as the second path, and now it's very popular and it's not competitive. You can be ready for college and career, and I think we keep focused on that. And the same thing is true in our workforce programs, that we help all of our job seekers seek something that's really viable for them and that meets the employer's needs. And I will say, South Carolina is so connected to their employers, and I think that's what's driving the great work that's being done in workforce and education.
Well, that's a great way to kind of wrap things up. We've run out of time, I think, or we're pretty close to it. We've gotten all the questions in. So really appreciate you guys' time, WIN sponsorship of this particular panel, and you guys all participating in this. And look forward to continuing to do good things in South Carolina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.